Hello, I'm Bartosz Wieliński, and you're watching TVP World Talks, where every word matters. Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz has begun his visit to Central Asia, a vibrant region with great economic potential, especially when it comes to trade and energy. The European Union is very eager to tap into the natural resources present there. However, will it be possible to unseat the traditional Russian dominance and also China's ambition to make headway into the region? Well, this is one of the many questions that we will attempt to solve with our guest today, Bartosz Wieliński, Deputy Editor-in-Chief at Gazeta Wyborcza. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So first of all, let's begin with what is the main focus of Mr. Scholz's visit to Central Asia. Is it mostly about the economy, or is it perhaps also about the bigger picture when it comes to geopolitics?
Well, I'd say that the signal Olaf Scholz wants to say to his countrymen is that he tries to settle the migration issue, which is, heavily, burdening the internal discussion in Germany. The number of Uzbek migrants in Germany isn't, that big. It's about 15,000 persons, but 15,000 people. But Uzbekistan could be a place where Germany could send Afghani refugees who were illegally in Germany or who committed a crime in Germany, who are no longer welcomed in Germany. So Uzbekistan could be just like Rwanda could be for Great Britain, a third country that some migrants from Asia could be sent as unwanted persons or as a person who should wait there till the paperwork regarding the asylum status would be processed. So that's some kind of hope Germany is now having regarding to some settlement of migratory crisis, which is affecting heavily internal politics. This recent triumph of AfD in Eastern Germany, that's the reason for that.
I'm assuming that they want to send Afghan refugees there because Germany does not maintain any official relations with the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. And also, there could potentially be a risk that they would be sending them into a country where they could face persecution by the regime, right?
Well, yes, Uzbekistan is quite close to Afghanistan, so there would be any cultural problem or ethnical problem with sending them back there. But this is still, the area of speculation. The question is how reliable Uzbekistan is as a partner. And the other problem is the workforce, because Germany, despite all this discussion about migration, they desperately need workers. They desperately need people to man all those posts in city maintenance industry. They need engineers. They desperately need engineers, and they don't have German people doing that stuff because there's a huge demographic crisis in Germany, and the number of people born is far less than the number of people who dies each year, so they need to import them from somewhere. And Uzbekistan is a country that struggles with unemployment, with youth unemployment. They have quite good universities. This is a heritage of Soviet times, and they could send their educated workforce to Germany. And Germany could profit from that, from this kind of brain drainage. And that's why Scholz and his Uzbekistani counterpart would sign a migratory agreement that would allow to, send some Uzbekistan migrants back to Uzbekistan if they violate German law. This is a substantial thing to do if you think about some kinds of long-term migratory strategy, and this first step has been achieved. But of course, oil and gas, this is an issue, and
before we go to the energy sector, because that's a major issue there, of course, but may I ask one more question with respect to this migration deal? Do you think there is a risk that, given the fact that Central Asia in general, they have a good relationship with Russia, and there is also, the borders are fairly open in that region, Do you think there is a risk that Russia could try and basically plant infiltrators among the potential workforce, and a person that has all the good credentials, for example, as an engineer, as a technician, could in fact be a Russian spy, and that this deal might facilitate the arrival of these individuals in the European Union? Do you think that these risks are being analyzed in Germany, and that a screening system might have to be put in place to avert such risks?
Well, let's keep in mind that there is a huge Russian minority in Germany. A lot of Russians who moved to Germany in the 90s, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. These are the Russians who has allegedly some kind of German roots. And they live there. They don't integrate with the German society. They live, using Russian media, buying their groceries in Russian shops, speaking Russians, and that's the major security issue for Germany. We've seen that all those demonstrations against Ukraine, pro-Putin, for years. So I don't think that Russia needs to send any more infiltrators, spy, even sabotages to Germany, because they're already there. They have been planted there for years, and Vladimir Putin used to serve in Germany as a KGB operative, and probably the network he was establishing in times of the Cold War still exists. Of course, there's a huge necessity of screenings, of looking who is coming there. The Central Asia is also infiltrated by the ISIS, by Islamist terrorist groups, and this is also a big risk factor. Screening is essential.
So that's a good point too.
Russia is already there.
We should also not forget that Hungary had been working on a far more extensive program, which would have allowed the influx of Russians into the EU. So that also is something to take into account there. Now, the energy sector. It has been already stated many times over that Central Asia is a great potential source of energy for the European Union. So what deals do you think might be on the cards for Germany, which is already importing quite a lot of oil from Kazakhstan, which is the next stop for Chancellor Scholz during this particular visit?
I'd say this is not only about the supply of raw resource, but it's also of making sure that resources from Russia doesn't circumvent the sanctions and they don't flow through Kazakhstan, because that has been proved already, that Russia is exporting goods that have been banned in the European Union through Kyrgyzstan, through Kazakhstan, to other countries of Central Asia, and that procedure must be stopped. It is in best interest of partners of Europe in Central Asia not to let Russia to avoid and circumvent the sanctions by using labels of their countries. And that's the issue that must be also tackled by Olaf Scholz. And of course, especially Kazakhstan is an extremely rich country in terms of resources that are desperately needed in Europe. But still, there's a China next door who also would like to be supplied in cheap energy sources by those countries. And there's a Russia who would like to, stop any independence, trade independence of Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan or any other Central Asian countries. So, having a reliable deal is extremely difficult in that situation. Russia is still powerful enough to exert pressure to do subvert operations to hamper this process of aligning between Central Asian countries and Europe. But we clearly see that Russia is no more, absolute power. That those countries feel that there's more space to play. At least they feel that there's more space to play in relations with
Kassym-Jomart Tokayev has shown that he can be fairly independent. I mean, he has not been really doing what Putin wanted him to. But then again, it is not a complete realignment, as you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, just not using Russian during meetings with Putin. There's a good appear stance that looks good on news television, but there's still a question: what's the real content? What's inside? What is really the how big is this free field they could move on? And the war in Ukraine showed clearly that Russia doesn't want to concede any terrain to the Westerners. They think, using the terms of 19th century, early 20th century, when the land, the territory is the important factor, and they clearly wouldn't allow Kazakhstan to go westwards in such a way the Ukrainians did. And we still must keep in mind that going too fast with those countries would be counterproductive, because the Russia would react to that in a brutal, harsh way. You can't simply exclude any possible retaliatory option. So maybe that's why Olaf Scholz is there. Because the Germans are extremely prudent. They fear the very word of very notion of escalation, and they won't do anything that could add us another escalation in another point of this continent.
So this attitude has actually brought a fair degree of skepticism towards Mr. Scholz recently, and in fact one of our guests earlier today suggested that Germany wants to do deals with Russia, perhaps that it wants to do them beneath the veil of dealing with Central Asian countries. Of course, this point of view is based on the assumption that Germany really wants to end the war very quickly, which recently Mr. Scholz has suggested, but also that it doesn't really want to maintain the same degree of support for Ukraine anymore. What do you think is the situation there? Because we also have elections in the background. So do you think that perhaps Mr. Scholz wants to create the impression that he is dealing with countries close to Russia, he wants to bring a peace conference with Russia's participation because he's afraid of the far right from AfD, which have been taking away voters, and he may want to claw some of these voters back by presenting a more pro-peace stance to these people? What do you think of this whole dynamic?
Well, actually, I fear that this is, the stance of Polish right, that Germany must not be trusted with regards to Russia. And of course, Germany did much in order to lose confidence and faith by the Polish side. And it's really hard to not to blame Germany for that, what happened in the East. They took their part of their guilt.
No, of course, but they have been helping Ukraine a great deal too. I mean, sending military equipment to Ukraine, air defense systems.
Sure.
So give credit to where credit is due. Lots of this German equipment is praised by the Ukrainians. It's doing very well on the front lines. But it's just the question. It's a question pertaining to Mr. Scholz's political resolve more than anything else, really.
This is out of the question that Germany. That's what needs to be done. Of course, they could do better, and every country in the West could do better in terms of supporting Ukraine. And the past is the past. We can't change that. We still think of Mr. Schroeder policy that has been continued, but Mr. Merkel, there was some explanation for that, and it was rational at the moment, and nobody could have expected such atrocity to start like they were. But the problem is this chancellor. I'd say that he's rather lame duck in Germany after this election in September. This coalition is trembling, is falling apart. And maybe the question is how long he will be the chancellor and if he survives the end of the year. I don't see any possibility for Germans to return to the business as usual with Russia, especially when the Nord Stream has been damaged to such extent as it has been done. It wouldn't be possible to convince the German society to work together closely with a mass murder as Vladimir Putin is.
Which is what most political elites understand, perhaps apart from the AfD, but this is a totally different issue, of course.
And
unfortunately, we have run out of time.
Is 15%. The AfD is just 15% of German voters, so don't overestimate them. Yeah.
Absolutely, but German Chancellor Olaf Scholz really has to present the right message to prevent them from making further gains on the political scene. Bartosz Wieliński was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Excellent.
And I'm Bartosz Wieliński. You're watching TVP World. Please do stay with us.